Well, and I don't want the rules to benefit bigger schools as compared to smaller schools. And I don't want them to do where they benefit us as coaches and universities and bottom lines and dollars. What those rules should be meant to take care of are the kids. I mean, if they're trying to keep an eye out for somebody, then be honest about it and let those things have an impact on the kids that we're trying to get here. Just like you said, looking at those kids that may not have everything in the world given to them, and then we put rules on top of that. You know what? A lot of those homes that my coach is going to recruit at, one parent in that household. Mm-hmm. That's all that's there. And that level of income is always lower because it is one parent, and they have to try to do everything they can to scratch it straight just to make it. And now you're going to put a kid in a situation where he's going to be sent off from everything that he's known into a foreign country. And that's what a college campus to a lot of these kids, they're the first person in their family to go to college. And here they come into a foreign world and don't have any idea on how to make a grocery list, how to pay bills. Right. But we throw them in the fire and say, hey, here you go.
And you can't help them.
No, I know, and that just drives me nuts. You can't help them in any way. I'm not talking about writing a check for everything, but at least I can try to guide them and help them. But those rules are made by those people who are not walking in those shoes right now, and that's hard to do.
But you know, Coach Spurrier in the SEC has stirred up a little controversy. Obviously, he wants to pay players. He wants to take some of his salary, and he wants to start writing checks to young men. We have this debate a lot on this panel. Two-part question. First of all, what are your thoughts on paying players? Number two, do you see one day that players will get a certain amount of stipend beyond their scholarship?
I think that there's going to be a stipend that will come along. Now, how long that's going to be, I'm not sure, but I think that it's going to happen. The other part of that I want to answer for you is that stipend is going to have to be fair across the board. And when I say fair, you're now going to affect my scholarship budget. Because now I have this amount of money that I deal is for scholarships. Now you're going to add those stipends on top of my budget that I have to pay for each month. It's going to increase my budget's going to take a hit. I mean, it's going to be a huge amount of money. Now, can Ole Miss afford it? Yeah, we can go out and raise money. Can Arkansas State? It's going to be tougher. Can Ball State? It's going to be tougher. If you start working your way down to all the colleges in Division I and saying, hey, Alabama's not going to have trouble doing it. USC won't have trouble doing it. But these smaller schools, is the playing field going to be fair?
Well, when you talk about across the board, are you actually talking about across the board from athlete to athlete, from football player to soccer player? Or are you talking about from Ohio State to the smaller colleges when you talk about being fair?
Well, you know, you're going to have to look at it both ways. And I mean, you're going to affect the entire athletic budget if you go across the board for every sport. But with that being said, the rules are in place to take care of the kids. If that kid's a football player, then you should take care of it. If that kid's a soccer player, then you take care. If she's a rifle girl, you better take care of her because that's why they're here for, and they're here to get an education. But in doing that, are we taking up so much time? Because you know all these kids are required to do so much schoolwork, so much study hall time, so much mentor time. Then they're going to have some practice work. They're going to lift weights, all of which takes place, and it's about 9 o'clock at night when they're done.
And still going to be a student.
Still going to be a student. They'll go home at night, and they're trying to find some way, somehow, to eat a little bit, get some rest, or do some homework, by the way, and then get up in the morning and do it again. Whereas the general population does not have to do that. When they're finished with school, they can go to a job, they can go home, or mom and daddy's helping pay, or aunt and uncle. Somebody's helping do something, or they're helping themselves, whereas they have time to do it, and a lot of my kids don't. And I'm not just saying football, I think it's all sports across the board.
But I think there's ways to fund it. I mean, I really believe there's ways to fund it. You look at just what happened with the NFL. I mean, the media, they're going to fund a large portion of what just happened. And I think that in major college football, if we create a playoff and you designate some of those funds from a game that I talked about earlier in the year, creating a presidential bowl where we have one national championship and we take some of that money and we earmark it to take care of projects like that. And then the other thing I've been on this panel about is we ought to have 128 teams in the NCAA basketball tournament. We ought to use that first round game to fund those projects like that. I think the media will pay for it, the media will buy it, and we got half the job done at that point.
Those bowls though in those smaller games, and I think we're gonna have trouble there because, man, we're not kidding anybody. It's all about the dollar.
No doubt.
If you're gonna, and I'm gonna use the words water down, and that's the wrong term to use. But if I'm gonna put that many teams in, and I'm McDonald's, and I want to put my commercial dollars somewhere, do I want to put my commercial dollars where team number 120 and 119 are playing, or do I want to put it where Kansas and North Carolina are getting? I mean, it's a tough battle. Now, I think, like you said, there's ways to do it.
There's ways to do it.
And I think that if we want to bad enough, we find a way. The other problem we're going to run into with that, and I think that when we talk about across the board, is where are we going to say is fair? Let's just say we go with a stipend for a room and board. Is the cost of living at USC the same as it is at University of Mississippi? Right. Is it the same at Tuscaloosa as it's going to be in Baton Rouge or in Brooklyn, New York? So those are going to be, what's fair is fair. Because if I'm a school that I'm recruiting and I'm at that school and my cost of living is more, I'm selling that. Hey, your check at Ole Miss is $800 a month, but when you come to my school, it's $1,400 a month. And that's something I would sell.
I just got an email recently about this fundraising drive that they're fixing to partake. It's going to be one of the biggest in the history of Ole Miss. How is that going to benefit the football team? I know, Coach Nutt's going to want something. Is that money going to move over into football and help him out, or will it be spread over all the schools?
I think the foundation has a lot of different projects that they're trying to take on and tackle it. And from what I understand, it is a grand movement that they're trying now. I think the basketball arena is one of the big things at the top of their list, and as well it should be. If you go there to the Tad Pad, and I know there's a lot of history there and a lot of things that happen there, but man, I'm trying to find some place to go and entertain a 17-year-old young man, and I'm not sure if the Tad Pad is where it is now. I've seen the pictures of what they want and what they're trying to do, and you know what? It's got to have a lot more lights and bells and whistles nowadays, because the recruiting process is a wild animal, and they need to be entertained. They need to be at Taj Mahal, and Ole Miss deserves, I think, something new and better than what we have. And I think the basketball program will benefit that. I know there's a lot of other things on the list, some of which that I don't want to talk about here, because I know they've got to move it on. But it's a grand list. The AD and UMA is really trying to move and get things done, and it's going to be a big fundraising effort.
Your kids are into this high-tech stuff. I mean, you can look at it now. I mean, everybody got these high-tech cell phones, and I'm sure kids would rather come to a facility that's got a talking shower than one that that old common shower.
You don't think
so it's just the way it is. It makes a difference.
There's no question about it. When you have big screen TVs and flat screens and ways, I mean, man, you'd be surprised on how recruiting has taken over such a big thing nowadays.
Go ahead, Keith.
Coach, we're eventually probably in the next segment going to get into talking about this upcoming season, but we talked about paying for players, and we talked about the little things, and I did read an article, and I know they happened to be our first opponent, that the BYU coach came out and made a statement and said that SEC coaches are being paid too much money, and it's taking out the amateur status of college football. I know you guys read it. I'm sure it put a little burr in your saddle.
Sure.
And I'm sure you guys have talked about, what are your thoughts on that statement from him?
You know what? There's coaching in itself. There's a lot of money there for those guys, and no question about it. They're making a good salary. But I know one thing: if I'm making $35,000, $45,000, $50,000 a year, and let's just say I'm coaching high school ball like I was before, and I'm making $6,000 a year. I know that going in, that I'm teaching school, and I'm done at 3 o'clock, and then I have practice, and I'm done at 5 or 6. And in my off season, I know the coach Harder's up there all the time at Lafayette, and there's a lot of time involved. But walk in those shoes now before you start throwing stones about what that money is for, because you have another season like last year, that money will be gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll all be going with it. And so, there's money there, but you know what? There's a lot of pressures and added stress that comes on with that. And I don't have an answer for you. Is it money driven? Sure, but once again, you want the best, you're gonna.
Yeah. Did you guys also, though, real quick? Did you find it ironic that he talked about every coach's salary in the SEC, but yet wouldn't disclose his own because they're a private university?
That's right. You don't have to tell what you don't want to tell. You can always throw stones, I guess. If you're a Mormon at BYU, your glass house is not as see-through as it needs to be, I guess.
Well, the more that's given, the more that's required.
No question.
I mean, if you're in an institution where you're making a big salary, the fans are going to demand a whole lot more, and eventually they're going to want you. The SEC championship is not going to be enough. They're going to want you to win the national championship, or you're right, those dollars will be gone.
That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. If you don't mind, I'll get you to stay for one more quick segment. We'll take a break. We're at Irie on the Square, and we're going to come back with Coach Beaumont right after this. Back with more Sports Roundup in just a second.
We got to be pretty good friends that summer. We, hung out pretty much every day.
We worked together all summer and got to be really good friends, and through that process of us getting to be good friends, I think I just started to have a little crush on him. And
funny story, I guess her car broke down at the beginning of the summer, and so we lived pretty close to each other, so she had to have a ride. So that's kind of how we, especially how we got to know each other, is just through riding to work and from work together.
And he kind of approached me one night and said, "Look, this is the way I feel about you," and so that's kind of how the whole process began.
The way kind of we went about it was I prayed about it for a little bit, just because I thought it was important to have her dad, as a part of our relationship, and so I went and talked to her dad about some things.
And then we prayed about it again for about another week, and then he went and talked to my dad again.
We sat down and had a little bit of a 2-week kind of sit down, pray about it, think about it, and kind of did that for about 2 weeks.
Ben would always take me on theme dates, like they were never just a boring date. And our
first date, we went to a restaurant in Jackson called Fratese's.
He's Italian, and he got it to go, and he took me to
a park that was nearby, and I had a little picnic set up out there kind of at night, and we just hung out there. The park looked out over the reservoir, and so we just hung out there. And
it was just really sweet. I thought it set a really good precedence for the rest of our relationship. It's not just a mundane, normal, boring relationship. So that was our first date.
The letter X. It's one tough letter, and the only one that stands for something. It's the mark of the unknown factor, the spot of the buried treasure, the model of rugged beauty. But what really sets it apart is its power to multiply everything.
Electrical needs? Then come in to Batesville Electric, where you'll find a full line of electrical supplies. Our professional staff will be glad to help you with all of your electrical needs, whether it's industrial, commercial, or residential. We custom cut your wires from 14 to 500 MCM and everything in between. The next time you need electrical supplies, then look no further than 351 Highway 51, Batesville, Mississippi. Batesville Electric Supply.